Hello and thank you for joining us on the last edition of Journalist Hangout this week. I'm Binga Oreshegun. Today on the program, President Tinubu seeks Senate's approval for 1.48 trillion naira Rivers State budget. 22 APC governors endorse President Tinubu as sole 2027 presidential candidate. And later on the show, Labour Party faction leader Callistus Okafor quits, slams Peter Obi's leadership capacity as Atiku denies dumping PDP, confirms talks with Obi El-Rufai. Well, I'll be hanging out with Tunde Abaton and Adekunle Yusuf. Journalist Hangout starts right now. Now let's begin the conversation. In the face of the state of emergency in Rivers State, efforts must be geared towards ensuring that development is not halted. As such, President Bola Tinubu has written to the Senate and the House of Representatives seeking the consideration and approval of the lawmakers for the 1.48 trillion naira appropriation bill for the South-South state. Now, according to the President, if approved, the money will be used by the emergency rule government of the state to provide for education, agriculture, free drugs, and others. The President of the Senate has referred the budgetary proposal to its Committee on Emergency Rule in the state. Now let's share this story by TVC News, Joke Adisa, with you.
Of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
A correspondence from the President, Bola Tinubu, opened the day's legislative business. The Speaker reads out the letter requesting the approval of the House for 1.48 trillion naira for Rivers State for the 2025 fiscal year.
Appropriation bill for the year 2025 is in the total sum of 1,481 billion. Wherein the sum of 324 billion is for infrastructure, both ongoing and new projects.
The fleet of opposition parties depleted once again as Enugu State member Sunday Umeha announced his defection from Labour Party to the All Progressives Congress.
In furtherance of my unflinching resolve to effectively represent my people, I have decided to align with the renewed agenda of President Bola Tinubu.
Meanwhile, Minority Leader of the House, Kingsley Chinda, raised a point of order challenging the legality of Mr. Umeha's defection.
The practice we experience in Nigeria, particularly in our parliament, appears to be confusing to democracy generally.
A motion of urgent public importance on the need to address the ravaging insecurity in parts of Kano State was also adopted.
This ugly situation may be connected with the recent discovery of gold in the zone, which has attracted mining activities, including the presence of foreign nationals and other nefarious activities.
A bill for an act to establish the Chartered Institute of Entrepreneurship Consultants, sponsored by Lagos member Ali Taufik, scaled second reading.
I rise this day to present this bill announced to establish Chartered Institute of Entrepreneurship Consultants, charged with the responsibility of advancing the study, training and practice of entrepreneurship activities and determine the standard of knowledge and skills to be attained by the person seeking to become a registered member.
The House adjourned plenary to next Tuesday to enable members attend a political summit of the nation's governing party, Joke Adisa. TVC News, Abuja.
All right, thank you so much, Joke Adisa. But Tunde Abaton, let's start this way, because talking about Rivers State, I mean, we do know that this matter is in court when it comes to the legality of, the state administrator. But talk to me, what do you make of the decision, by the federal government, to send the budget of Rivers State to the National Assembly?
I think we have to understand one thing. The moment a state of emergency is declared in any particular state, right from the period of the First Republic, the president or the commander-in-chief of the armed forces will only send somebody there who will be acting on behalf of the president, because it's a state of emergency. Okay. Now, the question we should ask now is that the budget that is supposed to be 1 year, the man has spent already 2 years out of the 6 months. out of the 6 months emergency, does it mean that any budget that is approved now, after the expiration of the emergency period, if the man should return to that place, that is bounded by that particular law to implement that budget?
Okay. That means if the governor is returned.
If the governor is returned after 6 months of emergency period. But one would have expected that the budget should have been presented before now. Yes, we know that a lot of politics was in the removal of the governor and some other things. But the fact remains that we have to understand one thing, that the president is still the custodian of that particular state as the law remains now. So anything that any law, any decision that the administration should take now is dependent on the approval of the president in conjunction with the National Assembly, because it's a state of emergency. It's not it's de facto governor. It's not the jure governor.
Your thoughts on this? And also, I mean, the president's move to send the budgets to the National Assembly. Do you think this move is justified in this regard?
When you look at it right from the beginning, you know, the president, from his proclamation, asked the administrator to bring whatever he wanted to do to the FEC, and the National Assembly, in its wisdom, said, no, you bring to the National Assembly.
Yeah, for proper appropriation.
So, and I think the president is acting, true to the, what was done in the National Assembly. So I think it is in order. But you may ask questions. Why did it take this long?
After 2 months?
Why? What? It means all the money you've been spending, are they legally justified? You get what I'm saying?
I get you.
Why did it take this long? Because you see many people calling on the president that now, what's the need for emergency any long? Is there any need for emergency now? Is there no peace? You see, when you take a look at the whole thing, you ask questions. The governor elected, or let me say the suspended governor, the budget presented for the entire year was 1.1 trillion. We are now in May. And by the time approval or whatever is done, we'll be starting June, which means that almost half of the year is gone. Then the administrator is presenting 1.4
trillion.
And when you read, when you see, there are a lot of groups in River State, and you see what they are saying, nasty things. They are not happy. So you realize that where are this money coming from? Is it internally generated? Is it, federal? This is this and all of that. Because and you went to take a look at the judgments of the Supreme Court. The order was that represent that
budget to the State House of Assembly. But now, right now we don't have a
State House of Assembly is also, also special. So it has to be the National Assembly. Even when there is no state of emergency, whenever the State House of Assembly is unable to meet. There was a time we had something similar like that in Ogun State. I think it was the National Assembly that would take over that function. So I don't think the president has heard in law. Of course, we have seen several big name lawyers, challenging this. We know the proclamation itself is before the Supreme Court. And one would think that in this kind of serious constitutional matters, the Supreme Court will act and decide swiftly. Unfortunately, that is not the situation. And in proper democracies, constitutional matters are not allowed to drag. They don't waste time. Swiftly. You abandon everything and decide fast. And we face similar things during Buhari, during money redesign and all of that, when some states went to court and they challenged, and you got.
I understand.
So I expected the same Supreme Court to act in this manner, but we are not seeing that. But when we are not seeing this, the president will not have to fold his hands. Governance should continue in River State. you see how much was voted for road infrastructure, both ongoing and new ones, and that took the chunk of the budget. You saw the money appropriate, I mean, they are looking to earth. You saw the ones for all of that, you know, things. So, but you see a lot of groups coming up.
Okay. Now, Tunde, let's talk accountability now. I mean, looking at what he said, I mean, many people are wondering if the state administrator is accountable. I mean, when it comes to spending monies that belongs to the state. In your opinion?
In my opinion, as things stands today, the administrator is only accountable to the president and the National Assembly. Not to the people? Not to, no. The president appointed him on behalf of the people. Who will he report to? There is no state assembly. And we should know that, remember that the Supreme Court declared that there is no governance in Rivers State because there is no state of House of Assembly. The House of Assembly has been destroyed by the executive. And the state cannot exist without the three arms being together. Only the judiciary is there. But the House of Assembly that is supposed to act on behalf of the people is no more there. So the governor will now report to the president.
No, the state administrator.
The administrator will now report to the president who appointed him for the state of emergency. So, but now you will recall that the issue of saying whether somebody has been spending money, until probably in the last 3 years, most budgets, governance continues before budget is approved by either the State House of Assembly or the National Assembly. So it is assumed that you don't spend any money that is capital vote, but you are given a leeway period to spend money to continue running the administration, like paying civil servant salary and some other things.
So you think that is what's been happening
that is what should be happening in the past 2 months. So you cannot do any capital projects until that thing. And it is always the normal thing, even for the president and the State House Assembly. You know, until the last 2 years, we don't normally pass our budget until probably after 3 months or 2 months. In other words, they will have been spending money because governance cannot stop until we perfect such a situation whereby by December 31 or December 25, the governor or the president signed the budget, the appropriation bill into law. Then it is now deemed that any money that is spent from January 1 is legally and constitutionally spent. So but as things stands today, the man will only start implementing capital votes.
So in other words, if I get you right, what you're saying is he doesn't have to be accountable to the people as long as he's accountable to the president who appointed him.
For now, he's accountable
not
to
the people.
Not to the people per se, but to the president appointed him on behalf of the people. We should mind the way we are saying, because the moment the Supreme Court declared that there's no governance in Rivers State,
and
the people are the
don't forget,
the Supreme Court
we are not in normal times as far as Rivers State is concerned. When you're in an unusual situation like this, that's what happens. Many of the things are suspended. And the truth is that a proclamation was made and the National Assembly approved it, and it is properly gazetted.
Do you think this action by the president or the federal government, taking the budget to the House of Assembly, do you think it undermines Nigeria's federal structure and anatomy of the state?
Because this matter is before the Supreme Court, I wouldn't want to, talk about constitutionality or not.
The Supreme Court.
Many eminent lawyers believe the president doesn't have that power. You can declare state of emergency, but you cannot destroy, and you cannot dismantle, elected. That's what many lawyers believe. But there are still lawyers who believe that, usual circumstances, you can do this. Those are two strong schools of thought.
Strong arguments.
That is why I'm saying in this matter, I'm not particularly happy that the Supreme Court has dragged. It should have taken, this matter shouldn't take maximum more than 2 weeks.
To be decided.
Yes.
All right, your parting thoughts on this?
Well, I think we have to know that the democracy we are practicing, we are still perfecting it day in, day out. So we should not, really, there's no ideal situation. What you have is the reality and how you manage the reality of the Nigerian situation. The Rivers State reality is the fact that there was no State House of Assembly.
There was no State House of Assembly. All right, gentlemen, let's move straight to our next conversation. Now, it appears the race